afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of Black Health Trust. We are so happy that you have chosen to spend some time with us. We are excited about our topics today. As we have always told you, we try to keep you up to date with vetted information, and today is no exception. So without further ado, I will pass it over to our founder, Dr. Randall Maxey.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for attending. I thank my co-moderators, Dr. Barbara Neighbors-Stevens and Dr. Ivan Walsh and Dr. Jocelyn Hines. And as usual, we welcome Dr. Wilbert Jordan. And I've asked Dr. Suzanne Cutter to join us for our discussion as well. So we have had a very eventful week. Both from a political standpoint, from a violent standpoint, and just a lot of newsworthy events. And we're going to address some of these things. Simon, if you would put the first slide up, and Dr. Neighbors-Stevens and Dr. Walsh, if you would, assist me in discussing some of these topics as we go through them. So there was a bill passed as part of the Inflation Reduction Act. And this bill authorizes hundreds of millions of dollars for CMS to create a drug negotiation program. Let's go to the next slide, Simon. And do you mind making that as big as you can so I can see it somewhat? Okay. And this is a result of what was done back when I was president of the National Medical Association, when the president of the NMA, which was me, and the president of the AMA, we were forced to sign on to a bill under George W. Bush. It was called the Medicare Modernization Act, in which we had to agree, or they were going to cut payments across the board to all physicians by 1% to 2% for Medicare. But we had to agree then, even though we didn't want to, that Medicare would no longer be allowed to lower drug costs. And this was made by Pharma and the Republican Party. So now there's all this controversy about now how do we get it back down? And it was something that Congress created in the first place. So now we're back where we're going to negotiate certain prices. And the reason this is good is that Americans pay sometimes maybe 4+ times as much for a drug as do Europeans. And that's tragic. Go to the next slide, please.
So Dr. Maxey, before you leave that slide,
Yes.
Can you connect those two for us? So is the reason that Americans pay more that the European countries are already negotiating prices, and so we're just trying to catch up? Is that what's going on?
Well, it's really much more complicated than that. It's just, I heard somebody discussing the war in Afghanistan and the Middle East, and it's not just us against them, it's all these interactions.
Okay.
So, like, I believe there are only 2 of all the drug companies that are truly American pharmaceutical companies. And if I'm not mistaken, one is Pfizer and one is J&J, but every other pharmaceutical firm is either European, French, or East Indian in some ways. So they benefit those areas. So the ownership is not even here, but they have such a heavy lobby and they pay congressional candidates and congressmen and senators big money. And the same fight was fought about they didn't want generics. I remember when certain drug companies sent certain officers of the Medical Association first class several times to the WHO in Switzerland to have us lobby for brand names instead of generics. There's so much money in it that leads to corruption. And the lobbying is what pays the bills for these senators and these council people, if that makes any sense, Dr. Wallace.
Well, what the thing that I think makes a lot of sense is that prior to this bill being passed, it seemed like I couldn't turn on the television without hearing a commercial that was speaking against this. We don't want this. You know, don't let them negotiate prices. So instantly, I thought it was a good idea for this to be passed, just because I saw so much opposition coming directly at it.
Could I make a comment from the, not that I'm trying to represent the insurance industry, but I can tell you what happens. And in commercial insurance, frequently, drugs that are covered by Medicare are not covered. And the reason they are not covered is because they do an analysis and they compare existing drugs and they look at what benefit the newest drug provides and bounce that against the difference in the cost. And a determination is made whether, you know, some people are happy or not. They make the determination that you will get the same therapeutic effect without the additional cost by some other drug. Now, I have heard all of the kinds of things that doctors like to say. They're limiting my choice. But at the same time, those doctors probably wouldn't even know those drugs existed if the drug company hadn't been in their office giving them lunch and everything else. So I'm curious, if not skeptical. Let's just say I'm curious to see if this legislation really results in what it is being portrayed to do. Because there's too much at stake, too much money involved. And I'm sure if there's any way they can scoot around this legislation, they will scoot.
Oh, sure.
Let me bring this up and counterpoint to what you're saying, Dr. Neighbor. We know that in clinical trials that support most of these drugs, there are very few people of color, very few communities of color. So in many cases, what these insurance companies represent as being good for a treatment has nothing to do with the audience we represent. And just because something costs doesn't mean it's physiologically and pharmacologically good for the people. So one, we ought to be participating in clinical trials. And two, you can't base something purely on cost and not on its effectiveness. And you don't even know the effectiveness if the right population has not been included. So I don't want
they weren't included. How can you make the argument that exists?
I don't want to get too far on this one slide. Okay, we need to come back to this. This is just the tip of the iceberg.
That's a true statement. I think this whole thing, this is going to be interesting to see how it plays out.
Well, and I think, Dr. Maxey, we should, you know, as they say, you know, put it in the parking lot and get back to it, because it will play out in a way that impacts people's lives. So definitely we should come back to it.
Okay, next slide, Simon. So the CDC I'm not satisfied with what they've been doing for the past couple of years. And they've changed their minds again with this new guidance. And there's a lot missing from the guidance. And among the things that are missing are just, what is the communal responsibility? What are we supposed to do? What about people who are more vulnerable and disabled? What is the guidance that acknowledges risk and related suffering? A lot is missing that. What is masking? Is that an act of caring or just an act of politics and defiance? And do we really have a public health focus? And are we getting all of our data from South Africa and Israel? We don't really seem to have a good, comprehensive, self-guided public health program in the United States. And we fell behind with COVID. We're behind the 8 ball with monkeypox. So I don't know what's going on, but it sounds like we need to reorganize the whole existence of what the CDC is and make sure that it is science-based and not based upon the White House. But I'd like Dr. Naybert and Dr. Walks to comment on their thoughts on the issues of what's going on with the CDC. Can we really trust them? What should we do? How can we help fix them? I get better advice from Dr. Walks than I do from CDC.
I'm going to defer to Dr. Walks before I make my comment.
Okay, so let me say this.
Psychiatrist.
I
too.
think,
The CDC.
I'm sorry, Dr. Maxey.
I said, I like the fact that you're a psychiatrist dealing with the CDC.
Well, I also have been a public health officer dealing with the CDC.
I was
And
trying
I
to be
think-
funny.
And I think one of the things that we have to acknowledge is that the CDC director came out this past week and said, hey, we got to do some things better. I ordered this internal review and we're going to make some changes. I think what I've seen missing from the CDC is something that the CDC did well when I was health officer in DC. We had national issues that we were concerned about. It wasn't an infectious issue as much as it was bioterrorism we were concerned about back then. And so the CDC actually worked with local health officers and looked at what messaging needed to be effective in communities. And so at one point, we actually put out a document, actually it was a training program on risk communication that the CDC, I worked on the CDC with that, and it went out to every public health department across the country. So the CDC was looking at how do we learn from the people who we are going to give guidance to, bring them inside and develop things that we think will work and we can put out across the country. I think that was a model that certainly appeared to work back then. And I didn't see that same model as we went after things like the COVID-19. What I think is a challenge for the CDC now is that the CDC is trying to put out guidance that people are going to accept and is not going to be as politically charged as it has been in the past. And you can't really play the politics and try to avoid the politics at the same time as you're saying, we're going to go with following the science. And that's where I think the challenge is right now. And so, Dr. Maxey, I think we are seeing some things missing. We are seeing things about communal responsibility that are missing. We are not seeing as much of a concern for some of the subpopulations as we would expect to see, or as that we would want to see. And I think it goes back to who's in there helping make the decisions, who is in there helping vet information before it goes out, and are we needing to do something that is not going to alienate 48% of the population, because that's what happens when you try to do something that some people think, oh, it's fake news or what have you. So we live in a different world right now. And I think to close my comments, I think the CDC is acknowledging that things could be done better. I think they recognize they have a responsibility to all of the folks, and they're trying to figure out the best way to do that. So the more we can give useful input to what the CDC is doing, I think the better job they'll do.
Well, let me give a personal testimony that the advice that I have taken from the Black Health Trust and my co-moderators, that social distancing, that taking the vaccines and getting boosted and everything. I'm the most shot up doctor in the country. But I tested positive 6 days ago. And I don't know how it got inside my vault of a house, but I tested positive and I took the Paxlovid as my doctor, Dr. Walks, told me to take. And I stayed in the bed, stayed in the house, and I'm doing a lot better. But had I not taken those vaccines, had I not had my boosters, and had not had the antiviral, I really would have been in bad shape. So I took our advice, Dr. Neighbor Stevens, Dr. Walker, and I'm still here.
Take mine.
Still not really ready to run track yet, but
I told you not to do something.
well, I didn't
That's-
get it from there.
I'm gonna say it in a less kind way, Dr. Neighbor Stevens. We told you not to take your behind to Atlanta. We told you that.
I did not come back from Atlanta with, I started to say monkeypox. I did not come back from Atlanta with COVID.
You know what, Dr. Maxey, in all seriousness, first of all, we are all very glad that you did follow the science, take good advice, have all your boosters, and then take your Paxlovid. All of that makes perfect sense. I think what we're seeing from the CDC and what we're seeing from other sort of trusted people that we look to is that folks have kind of given up politically on preventing, and folks are letting people know that there are antiviral treatments available. We do want folks to test, but this whole thing about personal responsibility and you doing what you know you ought to do is kind of where we are as a country. And I think that we have to continue to preach this message of get your shot, get your booster, use common sense. If you have anything that you think is maybe, take your test at home and don't infect others. We have to keep saying that because that is good advice. That's good medically vetted advice that we give. At the same time, our country is dealing with not just what's best medically, but also what's best economically and all the other things, all the other boxes they have to check. So Dr. Maxey, you keep doing what you need to do, and the rest of us will keep doing what we need to do. And it's Sunday. It's a good day to pray about everything else, right?
That's right. Very good. Let's go to the next slide, Simon.
Well, I want to make a comment about CDC, a quick one.
Okay.
And that is, given that, and I kind of want to underline something that Dr. Walks was kind of walking around. I don't care what or how scientifically based the information is that CDC puts out. Once it leaves them, it is subject to being manipulated, mutilated, and everything else by the world we live in. And so I agree, they did not handle things the way they needed to be handled. There are a lot of reasons for that. Some of them were external to them, and a lot of them were internal. But as with everything, it seems, they need to have the appropriate input from all communities as they formulate policy so that it is reflective of the needs of all and not just developed within the prism that they typically use. And I think that at least Dr. whatever, the lady that's over the CDC, she seemed, Walensky, she seemed sincere in her discussion of the review that was just completed. And she spoke to making substantial changes in the way that they are doing things. But unless they change some of the people who are involved, and that's not to say that they're not individuals from communities of color involved. Some of my very good friends are on advisory committees to the CDC. But those are advisory committees,
But we
and
need more
somebody
involvement.
at the table.
Okay, I want to get to our main subject. I got one more slide before we get to the main thing I want to deal with today. Go to the next slide, this one. So monkeypox, and we know that that is growing exponentially in the world, and especially in the United States. But recent evidence shows that there are specific sexual behaviors are linked to where monkeypox symptoms showed up on the body. And we know that it's been evident in proctitis. We know that it's been evident in certain types of pharyngitis. And for those who had rectal sex as a recipient or oral sex as a recipient, that's where the lesions showed up. So the lesson here is be careful in whatever your sexual proclivities are, because it's been shown that this virus, even though it's given mainly by touch contamination, that these non-keratogenous tissues will accept this virus. And just as a side note, there was even a documented report of 2 men who both slept with their dog and transmitted it to the dog as well. So this stuff is contagious, not only human to human, but human to animal. And it can be quite uncomfortable. And I can't see who's on the call, but if Dr. Jordan is on the call, I'd appreciate his comment here as well as our co-moderators.
Dr. Jordan is on. If we could unmute Dr. Jordan and get his comments, please. There you go.
I'm unmuted. Thank you. Good afternoon, people. First
Good
question,
afternoon,
first
sir.
comment. We keep forgetting about the AIDS epidemic, and we were very involved with CDC. When when companies tried to make people use one drug or the other, the HIV community fought that. The NMA fought it, because I have the NMA sign on. But I think it's important that we understand that we can't go to sleep with this. So that's the first thing. My problem with monkeypox is we're still, as doctors, having a hard time dealing with sexuality. People have sex, and that's what it shows. And I had 2 men come in last week, first trying to convince me that they were heterosexual. First thing, when you try to tell me, first off, I haven't met you, you walk in my office and the first thing you're gonna tell me is you heterosexual. I know you're not heterosexual. But that's what a lot of people do. And one had lesions, again, as described here, in the oral cavity, and the other had lesions on the hand. And that sort of just tells you what people are doing. But I've got to first, and particularly among Black men, get them to feel comfortable admitting they have engaged in a same-sex act. And one of the things I'm hoping to get the NMA to do is really deal with the whole issue, the definition, because every Black man who's had sex with a man is not a homosexual. He's had sex with a man, he's had a homosexual act, but that doesn't mean he's homosexual. And we need to stop allowing another interest group to define us. And what we call gay here, they do not call gay in Thailand, they don't call gay in Japan. we need to be more proactive in defining these terms rather than just letting people come up with anything now. Now you got LGBTQ binaries, 67854. I don't know what the hell they mean. But we're just sitting back, letting folks do that, and I disagree.
So what I like to
But I
do,
think we need to be more comfortable as physicians in dealing and talking about sexual behaviors. People do things, and because Reverend Edenward can get up in church on Sunday morning and preach a sermon does not mean he doesn't go to the park on Friday night and engage in sex.
so
We've
Dr.
seen
Jordan,
the information from both the Mormon church, the Catholic church, all the past people are people, and they will do things they shouldn't do and then pretend they don't do it. But I
Dr.
think
Jordan,
we need to be more comfortable in just talking about sex, period.
Dr. Jordan, what I'd like to do, if you would, I'd like to talk with you offline and arrange for one of our Wednesday night sessions initially and a Sunday session to go more deeply into this issue of sexual activity, monkeypox, and I'd like you to lead that if you would.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Many people don't know that you're one of our leading experts in infectious disease, and we really value your contribution. Let's go to the next slide.
Dr. Maxey, as we transition to the next slide, I wanted to make a comment on monkeypox, which I did not, and I was going to make it, and Dr. Johnson, who is with us now, put it in the chat, which is half of the monkeypox in this country is in Black males. So we really need, and the vaccine, the more important point is they are not getting access to the limited amount of vaccine that we have. So we do need to be concerned about that as our, from a community point of view.
And let me just add, Dr. Maxey, as we're transitioning, the point that Dr. Jordan makes is such a huge point. We like to label everyone, and it makes it easier for us to put people into categories versus a functional definition that we can use as we're doing our diagnostic workups. There may not be any difference between, oh, you're homosexual, or oh, or you're a man that has sex with another man, or you have had sex with another man, but certainly people are less comfortable with labels than they are with functional questions, like the way Dr. Jordan put it. And it allows us to engage people differently. It allows us to focus on where our interventions need to be. So this whole issue of needing to give somebody a label, I think should be part of what we do as we're working with Dr. Jordan further on this.
Well, thank you so much. Is Dr. Cutter on with us?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So I was having a discussion with Dr. Neighbor Stevens earlier in the week, and she called my attention to an article in the Lancet, and it looked at global risk factors for deaths from cancer. And in particular, with those factors that were potentially modifiable by changing your lifestyle and addressing that. And I invited Dr. Cutter, who is a cancer surgeon, but who is now starting to focus on wellness, to be available to answer questions, and we could put questions too. But I'd like Dr. Neighbor Stevens to see if she can summarize what she saw in that article and why it's relevant to what we need to do in our communities. And then let's open the discussion with her and Dr. Cutter and the rest of us.
Well, I really think it's a simple statement. They found that 44% of cancer deaths were preventable to 10 things, but the top 4 were smoking, alcohol, obesity, and unsafe sex. There were a few others, but these made up the majority of the 44%. that were preventable causes of death. And when I read that, I just said, this is a great academic article, but let's make this real, because we have talked about this over and over and over again. You being each of us have to take responsibility for taking care of the temple that was given to us. And it's not hard. And I don't want people to feel like they have to feel guilty. I think if Dr. Cutter and the rest of us just talk about these 4 factors, not from a point of view of a guilt trip, but how really it can be incorporated into your everyday life. Nobody, for example, on obesity, nobody expects you to drop 60 pounds in 2 months. But what we do hope that you will attempt to do is to adjust your diet and increase your activity level so that you can have a gradual and appropriate weight loss and improve your overall health. So with those opening comments, I'll turn it over to Dr. Cutter.
Good afternoon, Dr. Cutter.
We need to get there we go, unmuted. Go ahead, Dr. Cutter.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me. And when Dr. Maxey invited me this morning, I dropped everything so I could be with you. This is one of my favorite topics.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you were busy cutting. I love her name, being my favorite surgeon. Her name is Cutter. But you have talked to the Black Health Trust several times, Dr. Cutter. And can you relate what some of these modifiable risk factors are to cancer? And just for continuity, why don't we start with the sex part and then go to the smoking and obesity and whatnot? But
okay. Well, in the study that you shared with me, and this is a study from Lancet, and I just got a glance at it today, but, out of the ones that were reviewed by Dr. Naybert-Stephens, unsafe sex practices was number 4. Okay, the top 4: smoking, number 1, alcohol use, high body mass index, and then unsafe sex. And they did a comparison between these 2 causes, looking at 2010 and 2019. I found it interesting and not surprising that there were drops in the rates of smoking, the alcohol use, and there were increases in the body mass index and the unsafe sex. So what it means is not that nobody's smoking anymore and nobody's using alcohol. It's just such a preponderance of increases in BMI and unsafe sex practices that those are beginning to overtake the traditional modifiable risk factors of smoking and alcohol use.
What is BMI, doctor?
BMI is body mass index. And if you look at the calculation for that, it really is basically a comparison between height and weight. And what it does is it takes a look at the proportion of a person's body. Now, BMI is not perfect. It sometimes it overestimates certain populations, people who are bodybuilders who have a significant amount of muscle. Muscle is heavier than fat, and then some body types. So that's basically what BMI is.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So how does sex, I'm not on a sex kick really, but how does sex play a role in being a risk factor for cancer death?
So that's a really good question. And, I also want to incorporate some of the things that Dr. Jordan said, because, what we're looking at is not so much an act as it is an exposure, right? And it's an exposure of mucous membranes to factors that maybe it isn't typically exposed to. So it's the sex practices and the deposition of certain illnesses in those mucous membranes, right? Because that's where the body absorbs things. So mucous membranes includes the oral cavity, right? The vaginal vault, as well as the rectal vault. You know, those are our mucous membranes. And also nasal passages, if you want to be, you know, somewhat technical about it, esophagus and things like that. Nasal passages, not so much. It's a more specialized area. But these areas are designed for absorption. And so what's different between those and the skin is a barrier, right? It's hard to penetrate, but those mucous membranes are looking for things to bring in and filter. So the next question might be, well, you know, what are they being exposed to? So many of you have heard about things like HPV, human papillomavirus. We see a lot of commercials about vaccinating young people, teenagers, but we start to see HPV-related cancers in the oral pharyngeal cavity, as well as through the vaginal area, you know, all those areas that we named. Another one that a lot of people don't think about is hepatitis. Hepatitis would lead to liver cancer. And so those are some examples of some things that we need to look at in terms of sex-related transmission of factors that can lead to a malignancy.
So how does a high BMI or obesity fit into the cancer picture? And Dr. Nabors-Stevens, you should be jumping in anytime you want on this. Go ahead, Dr. Cutter.
Well, thank you. So I think, you know, I've kind of talked about this before from a pathophysiology standpoint and a physiology standpoint, but, you know, just to do a shortcut, there's a difference between the arrangement of the fat cells in someone who's quote unquote lean doesn't mean skinny, versus someone with a higher BMI or who is in the obesity category. And the difference in structure leads to increased risk of pro-inflammatory conditions in those who are in that obesity category. Those pro-inflammatory conditions just create a fantastic environment for the development of cancer. And not so much just the cancer cells themselves, but also replication and then distribution throughout the body and leading to metastasis. So all of those environments are enhanced.
Dr. Cutter, I need to ask a question. There's one individual I'm thinking about, but I don't need to say a name. We live in a culture now where people, the minute you say someone is a little bit heavy, you're body shaming. And why can't I just be big and healthy? So my question is, to go back to the point Dr. Jordan always brings us back to about needing to have a primary care doctor. If someone has a significantly high BMI, can they go to their doctor, get some sort of a clear understanding of what these inflammatory risks may be, and say, okay, you know what? I'm way heavier than what somebody may think is quote unquote healthy, but I've been to my doctor and I'm okay. I really am big boned. I really am just thick, you know, or is there a safe place for us to say to someone who is very much in that obese category and living their life and looking very active? Can a doctor like Dr. Jordan check up on them and tell them, hey, I drew some blood and your inflammatory markers are good, go on out there and have some more food?
That's an interesting question, Dr. Walks, and I'm glad that you're asking it, because it really does touch on the fact that there's not really a lot of physicians that are either very comfortable or very facile at talking about this category of BMI. So let's just start off with what is considered normal, okay? And I do that in quotes because there's a little variation based on ethnicity, not a ton, but there is a little variation. So we need to just understand that. But the high level of normal, so the upper limits of overweight is 30. 30 and up is the obese category. If you have a BMI of 32, you know, and you're kind of a thick, bigger person, things like that, you may not be in the obese category, right? You might be okay. But if your BMI is 40, you are. Okay, let's just get real. And then there's also morbid obesity. And now, because people really love food that's not good for them so much, we have super morbid obesity category. These are patients with BMIs of 50 and things like that. And so, let's kind of circle back and really talk about what it means. These numbers don't mean that there's, something inherently wrong with that human being. You are a bad person, something wrong with you and all that. And we're not talking about what people look like, right? Because, beauty comes in all shapes, sizes, and things like that. But what we are talking about is physiology, right? And so if you're telling me that you're morbidly obese because you've been eating kale and drinking plenty of water, right? And having lean proteins, then so be it, right? That's really what it is. But I wager you, if you have a BMI of 50, that's not what you've been consuming.
Right.
So really the goal is a lifestyle change and not so much you need to be skinny, right? And that's what I talk to my patients about. Your
Dr.
focus should, oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say your focus should be on lifestyle modification. Dr. Maxey.
Just a question. I have a slide in my deck and it shows over 50 plus hormones that are manufactured when you have abdominal adiposity that includes tumor growth factors, tumor necrosis factor, and all things, and even things that make more cytokines. There are all sorts of unhealthy hormones that are manufactured by central obesity. Maybe you could just comment.
Excuse me, Dr. Maxey, did you say abdominal adiposity?
Yes.
Dr. Maxey would never use a word like that or words like that, knowing that our audience includes lay people. Can you dial
Only
it back?
because she's going to define all that.
I'm a psychiatrist. I need you to help me with all those big doctor words.
Yeah, she's from Cincinnati.
So, I really like to use these words with lay people because some of these words are in the press. Some of these words, some physicians who are not maybe as enlightened or patient sensitive, they're going to use. So I like to use them and then define them so that we're all talking the same language. It's important for everyone to understand the words that are going to be used and what they mean. So adiposity is just a form of the word adipose. Adipose refers to fatty tissue. Everybody has fatty tissue. Okay, just because we talk about adiposity doesn't mean that you are fat. It just means that there's fatty deposits in different parts of the body. And that's kind of part of the shape of things. Between men and women, think about it. Who has the most adipose tissue? Just naturally based on hormones and physiology. Okay, it's women. So women are going to tend to be a little bit more fluffy, a little bit softer, a little bit curvier in general. Okay, but of course,
thank goodness.
Everybody has a different body style. And, we have, who is it? Twiggy to thank for this skinny is beautiful mentality, which before we had Twiggy in the 60s, a more Romanesque woman was considered beautiful. But she came on, for those of you who don't know, Twiggy is a modeling icon from the 60s. And before her, a woman with more curves and shape and softness was really considered beautiful. But she came onto the scene. She was almost emaciated looking. And all of a sudden that became the standard. So now a lot of models fall into that category. I'm here to tell you that's not what we're after. Okay, we're after habits. So let's get back to the abdominal adiposity. Dr. Maxey is right. That abdominal adiposity is very dangerous, and as is the kind of chest related, that apple body as well. But that abdominal adiposity becomes a little workshop for all those immune mediators that send the body into a frenzy of making all of these factors that promote cancer and actually other illnesses, other things such as insulin resistance. I don't know if anybody's talked about that. There's things that have to do, of course, with lipid deposition, which leads to atherosclerosis. So it's a multifactorial manufacturer of factors that are not great for the body.
Wow.
So, we could spend an hour on all of these, and obesity is has a heavy burden in our community. Let's talk about quickly some simple things about obesity that people need to do. You've already kind of talked about the conversation that needs to be had with your primary care doctor, but what else should our listeners be doing and thinking about around the issue of obesity?
You know, patients that I'm not going to give a full, obesity treatment to, I just give them like 3 simple, quick things that if you do this, you're going to decrease your weight and you're going to become healthier. The first thing is 4 to 5 servings of vegetables every day. Not fruits and vegetables, but vegetables every day. Now think about what that takes and how many servings that most people have. Most people have 1 to 2 servings, right? So 4 to 5 is going to give you the vitamins and the nutrients, the building blocks that you need for your body to function properly. If you can accomplish that, that takes you a long way. And what I tell them about those 4 to 5 servings is corn doesn't count, okay? Potatoes don't count. So we're talking about leafy greens, broccoli, all those green things and colorful peppers, all of that stuff. So that's number 1. The next thing I tell them is to have your body weight in kilograms in water every day. The impact that has is it helps with organ detoxification. It also helps with distribution of factors throughout the body, recirculation of factors or clearing and filtering out factors for the kidneys as well. So water just has a tremendous benefit. And the third thing I tell them is 3 to 5 times a week for 30 minutes each time, some type of physical activity. The easiest thing is walking. If you walk 3 times a week for 30 minutes and you do these other 2 things, your body will begin to make adjustments that are going to make you a healthier person.
That's exactly what I wanted you to share, Doctor.
I read your mind.
You did.
So just one thing I would add to that, Dr. Cutter. First of all, that's excellent. Giving people manageable, clear stuff to do is just a wonderful thing. I think so many times we don't focus enough on that clear communication part. Is someone leaving my office with a clear message about what they're going to do, some clear instructions? I like to tie those kinds of things not only to being healthier, but to what matters to people. For example, it's tough to get up and run around and play with your kids or your grandkids when your BMI is 50. It's tough to be able to show your kids how to do a forward roll or how to stand on your head, because you just can't move as well when you're carrying that much around. So I like to ask people what's important to them. What do they like to do? What do they want to do? And I find that connecting what you just talked about to something that they value in terms of activity or ability can really help them. And anybody who comes in and ever says to me, "Ooh, when I retire, I'm going to get in shape," I just look at them very plain. I say, "No, you won't. On my next birthday, I'm going to." No, you won't. So today is the day that we start all that, not some day in the future. So, but thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. I love clarity. Clarity is my favorite word. It really is. I love clarity.
Can you talk a little bit about the tobacco issue?
Well, tobacco has unfortunately been around for many, many, many years, right? And, there's a lot we didn't know about tobacco initially. So people were kind of using it, with reckless abandon in all different forms. So what it did is it set up some habits in certain communities for use, whether it's, dipping snuff or smoking cigars or pipe smoking, cigarette smoking, all kinds of different factors. So what we have learned is it's the burning of that material that begins to introduce difficult factors into the body. And it's not just, a lot of people think, oh, I'll just stop smoking, it's lung cancer, right? But it's more cancerous than that. It's through the upper digestive tract, in particular, the esophagus and the stomach, and it's other cancers in different parts of the body. So tobacco isn't just limited to lung cancer. And it also really changes the structure of blood vessels as well. So that contributes to difficulties in circulation, especially young men who are having problems with circulation in their lower extremities. A lot of times that's attributable to smoking. If you stop smoking, then that improves the circulation in that area, and those problems often tend to resolve. So tobacco has a lot of different ways that it impacts the body, and there's really no truly safe way to introduce that to the body that I can think of. Can anybody think of a safe way to introduce tobacco into the body?
No, but I have a related question though.
Okay.
And I get this from many of my young people. I say, do you smoke? No, I don't smoke. I just use some marijuana. Is there a difference in smoking cigarettes and smoking pot in terms of health risks, cancer risks in particular, or smoking anything?
Yeah, I have to start off by saying I'm not, an expert on CBD and all of that, but I do know that there's a lot of factors that are released with the burning of cannabis, with marijuana. Now, there's other forms of that plant that seem to be less deleterious, the oils and the edibles and things like that. And so, there's some people who use that for things like cancer pain and for nausea with chemotherapy and some other things. So, those other forms seem to be safer. But I think in general, when you're burning something and you're taking that into your body, there's going to be an issue. It's just like when you have burnt meat, all of that char on the outside of meat, that's a carcinogen as well. So we just have to be aware of burning things and taking that into the body.
So when Dr. Walks is out in his backyard with his barbecue, he's got to not char the meat, right?
I think it's got to make it just medium well, okay? Not completely well with char, just medium well.
There are different kinds of problems. There's the you didn't cook it enough problem, and there's the you cooked it too much problem. So you have to be a virtuoso. You got to do it right, Dr. Maxey.
Spoken like a true grill master.
So, Dr. Nabors-Stevens, what else?
Alcohol. We need to talk about alcohol.
Alcohol, that is a really good topic because a lot of people do indulge, from time to time. A lot of times it is, just kind of a social drinking and things like that. And it's interesting when you question patients, I ask, I don't know about the rest of you physicians. I think it would be interesting for some other physicians to talk about this, but I don't know about you. But when I speak to every physician in a consult, I ask them the same questions about habits. I ask them about their smoking, alcohol use, drug use, even if it's somebody who's 90 years old and looks harmless, blood transfusions, and any accidents that have led to any injuries to the head or extremity bones. So I go through that whole thing with every single person, because when you start to decide who gets what questions, it's really exposing your bias, right? So we have to eliminate bias. And that's part of what Dr. Jordan was talking to us about earlier. Giving people labels is a reflection of bias. So we need to try to eliminate bias, but yet still have the conversations. So that's kind of a little overview of those habits. But in talking about alcohol, I don't just say, are you a heavy drinker? Because that's relative. I say, do you use alcohol? And sometimes people say no. And I say, ever? And they say, well, yeah, sometimes on the weekends. Okay, well, on a typical night, how many drinks do you have? Not too many. How many is that? 10. Okay, so you have to kind of question people along the line to get to the number. And you can't just say, how many drinks do you have? They say, I don't really drink. And then you're done with it, right? So I kind of take an approach of just kind of exposing, the drinking behavior to get a better idea as to what people are actually using.
So,
And to follow up on that, as you have outlined with the other agents that we talked about, how does alcohol impact cancer development?
Alcohol is something I'm just going to encapsulate it and say it kind of disorients cells and cell function. So it adds an element to cell machinery and things like that that kind of changes the way cells behave. And so that's why it isn't just limited to, just the upper digestive tract, where it really impacts a lot of different parts of the body. Then it gets into, circulation as well. It has an impact on circulation. So we start to see these changes, and, several different cancers are a result. And you can almost look at, alcohol toxicity as a toxin. It is a toxin when used beyond a moderate amount. And so what do you define as the appropriate amount of alcohol use? Dr. Nabrett-Stephens.
Well, in my patient population, none.
Because
I'm a pediatrician.
you're a pediatrician, right? And that's the right answer, right?
That's
Great,
so
Barbara.
wrong.
I like that answer.
Don't even use alcohol swabs, huh, Dr. Nabrett-Stephens?
Well,
No
my
question.
patients don't really like them.
So
But-
Dr. Jordan has had his hand up for a long time, and I don't want him coming to my house beating me up.
Is he unmuted?
Not yet. There we go.
Okay, good. Dr. Cutter, thank you. My question really is for Dr. Walks. I was in Tupelo, Mississippi at the airport, and I was sitting across from this absolutely beautiful young Black woman. She weighed about 560 pounds. And when she finally got up, she walked past me and she said, "Thanks for the admiration, but I'm not into older men." And I said, "I'm not admiring you for sex. I'm just wondering if you were molested." And she stopped and just said, "How did you know?" I said, "You're too pretty." And often very beautiful faced women will use their weight as when they've been molested. So she just said, "Can I talk to you?" So she sat down, we talked, her flight came, she said, I'll get another flight. So she missed the flight and we talked. And so my question to Dr. Walks, because we keep missing the impact that molestation is having in our community. 64% of my male patients at Oasis were molested. 88% of their sisters were molested. Of the women patients we had, only one was not molested. So I think another issue that we have to deal with is the whole issue of molestation and the ongoing psychological benefits, or not benefits, but the ongoing psychological trauma. Because if someone comes in my bedroom when I'm 9 years old and puts his genitals in a place he shouldn't, when I'm 45, I'm still dealing with it if I haven't had any therapy. And to me, that is one of the most overlooked issues that we have in our community, is some of the long-going impacts of that, period. I'd like Dr. Walks to comment on that.
So Dr. Jordan, one of the first things that Dr. Cutter talked about is in that category of take a good history, right? I remember being on rounds as a med student and hoping I would be the first one called on every time we went to a patient's room, because the answer to the first question is always take a good history. And we need to normalize the things that we ask about. For example, when I'm asking one little section of questions in an assessment, I always ask it this way. I say, are you a married person? Are you a single person? Are you in a relationship person? Because person seems to be a word that up until today is still a word that I can use without offending anyone, right? And the words that we can use become fewer and fewer as our society does whatever it does. But I still try to get at it. I still try to get at those questions. And I listen carefully when someone tells me that what their spouse's name is, right? Sometimes it's pretty easy. Sometimes they'll say George. I don't know a lot of women named George, but sometimes they'll say my spouse's name is Sam. I'm like, dang, is that Samantha? But we have to try to piece apart what the person is trying to tell us. And one of the things that I like about you, Dr. Jordan, is that you have never met a subject that you want to be embarrassed about. And I think all of us need to learn from that. We need to be absolutely common about what we're willing to listen to. And if people recognize that in us, if they recognize in us that we'll listen to anything, they'll tell us anything.
Mhm.
But if we come off very starchy, as I'm Dr. So-and-so, makes it hard to get a complete history out of people. So back to your point, I would probably not have asked the young lady walking by if she was molested. I'm not where you are yet. I would have thought that it would, but I probably wouldn't have stared at her either, Dr. Jordan, because I wouldn't have wanted her to think that I was staring at her. So I got a long way to go. I'm on my way to being where you are, but I hope that that when someone comes to see me as a patient, in the airport is one thing. When you come into my office is another thing. I need to make you comfortable telling me whatever it is you want to tell me. I need to ask questions that let you know it's okay to tell me. So I remember starting off many series of questions I ask with these words. I'll say, these are the questions I ask everybody. And then I go into my questions. And that allows people to hopefully believe that I'm not taking some cue or singling them out. But bottom line, Dr. Jordan, you're 100% right, man. If we don't make people comfortable telling us their truth, we will never be able to help them in the way that they need help. And so many times I will have a patient come in and tell me about the other doctors that they've been to see. And I'll tell you, the biggest compliment I get is when someone comes in and says, well, you don't sound like a psychiatrist. I'm like, all right. Because if I sound like a regular person to them, they'll tell me their regular stuff.
Yeah, I think that question that Dr. Jordan put was so important. Thank you for that. Let me go back. I didn't introduce Dr. Cutter well enough, but she is the president. I started to say the reigning president, but she is the current president of the Charles R. Drew Medical Society, which is one of the largest chapters or affiliate groups of the National Medical Association. I did mention she's from the Queen City, Cincinnati, but in her own right, she has been a computer executive. She has gone to medical school. She is a cancer specialist, a surgeon, and now gone into wellness. Did I leave anything out, Dr. Cutter? I want to make sure we give you your due. And I would like you to put your information in the chat, because we certainly like what you have brought to us on several occasions. And I just thank you for being here with such expertise, Dr. Cutter.
No, I appreciate that. You know, I do have a little bit of a technology background as well through computer engineering. And, you know, through the Charles R. Drew Medical Society, we are also working on a lot of activities for the community to build the pipeline of physicians for our community so that there's sensitivity and also interventions that really help. So it's through a variety of things such as scholarships, mentorship events for medical students and residents, and also trying to introduce more health and wellness activities and looking at areas such as food insecurity. So I do appreciate the opportunity to speak here, and I hope that you all will support our next fundraiser, which is coming up this fall. It will be in the Hollywood Hills at a beautiful home, and we will give you more details. Make sure you reach out to Don Howard to get those details. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cutter.
Dr. Gibson has had his hand up as well.
Can I, while we're unmuting Dr. Gibson, can I ask, based on Dr. Cutter's last comment about students in the pipeline, can I ask Dr. Belay to be unmuted? He's a face I haven't seen before, but I'm very excited. He put in the chat that he's with the U.S. Africa Institute and has a project to help increase the number of Black medical students and physicians in California. And I just wanted him to follow up Dr. Cutter's comment by telling us a little bit about the program that he has and how we may be able to help and support that.
Thank you so much, my brother, Dr. Works, and hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Belay. I am originally from Ethiopia, and I am the founder and president of the U.S. African Institute. It is an academic organization established to promote academic partnership between American universities and in African institutions, and also cultural exchange programs between Africans and in Americans. Most recently, we hosted the Mandela Washington Fellows for the first time in Los Angeles, and this program has been very much, European American centered and also, West Coast centered. So we're the first institution to be able to host young African leaders, including, medical, practitioners and medical doctors from 23 African nations for the first time in Los Angeles. And our work was recognized by the Los Angeles City Council recently. And one of our projects is really, to help increase the number of Black medical students and Black medical, doctors, particularly, Black men, because, we have a very small number of, less than 200, throughout this nation. So, and then that's also part of, my dissertation when I was doing my doctorate. So, we're very much intentionally in helping, increase the number of Black medical students, and we collaborate with a number of institutions, including Charles Drew University of Medicine and Science. And happy to be here today. I had a brief conversation with Dr. Maxey last time, and also with Dr. Smith. I was part of the Black Education Task Force before the pandemic, but because of the pandemic, I think I was also busy, so I was not able to follow up with the conversation. But happy to be back, and I look forward to collaborate with Dr. Cutter, who's doing really amazing work on student support. That's what we're doing. So we have some fund to be able to support anything related to increasing the number of medical students, particularly Black men. And again, happy to be here. I look forward to building this relationship.
So Dr. Belay, it sounds like either about Dr. Cutter's work, or you should know about Dr. Cutter's work, and she should know about yours. So I'm glad the two of you were able to connect today. Thank you so much for being with us and sharing that with us. It's as a Black man who went to medical school, yes, it would have been nice to have had more company than just me in my medical school class of 100 students. Thank you, sir, so much, Dr. Gibson.
Thank you very much, Dr. Walks, and once again, you stole my thunder. I was actually going to try to bring attention to the efforts of Dr. Belay, because what he is doing is so important for Black folks in the world, globally, on a global context. And it should not be lost on us that the hunger that's being suffered, the famine that's being suffered, not just in East Africa, but in America right now, with food deserts and such, it's a very, very mission critical issue. And the other things that he spoke to, the paucity and Dr. Walks, because like Dr. Walks, I hated being the only Black face in my pharmacy classes. I hated that. I didn't like that at all. So the rest of my life, I intend to devote to not only raising the standard of living for Black folks globally, but also increasing, just as Dr. Belay, Dr. Thaddeus Belay, who just spoke to us, thank God, about doing something. What can we do? Because you see these things on the news and you go, man, what can I do about that? Well, here's someone who has some answers, some solutions to the pollution. So to that, I say hats off to Dr. Thaddeus Belay and to Dr. Cutter and to Dr. Walks and everyone who has participated today. I have to add in addition to the things that Dr. Cutter talked about, it's probably not a bad idea to suggest that the patient maybe think about eliminating red meat from the diet, along with some of the other things, and make sure I'll see that vegetable commitment and make sure that we add the colors of the rainbow to that vegetable allotment, and perhaps even consider starting our calorie intake at midday. Dare I say, I won't call it caloric restriction. Some folks do, but it's documented in the journals that it's very, very helpful in helping folks to drop some weight, some tonnage, to improve their BMI. And just to step back even further, when we were talking about access to medications and the problem with the medications, the real problem with the medications is the activities of pharmacy benefit managers, PBMs. You hear me say that a lot, and it's true. And whether or not there's going to be any huge impact on the cost of pharmaceuticals in this country depends on what we do about the PBMs, the pharmacy benefit managers, because of the way that the acquisition of drugs in this country has been mismanaged. It's been mismanaged by pharmacy benefit managers who have actually taken by the way, 90% of the drugs, over 90% of the drugs dispensed in this country are generic medications, not brand name. So if less than 10% of medications is generic and not brand name, which is responsible for the runaway cost of inflation and drug pricing, that's enough. That's one of those things that make you go, So anyway, we can talk about pharmacy benefit managers, but we need to do something about pharmacy benefit managers. I finally have to confess, Dr. Maxey, you have an incredible opportunity that you mentioned to the folks at the beginning, at the onset, when you said Dr. Walensky is showing contrition. She realizes that she didn't get it quite right. Well, ergo, an opportunity to step up as trusted messenger, sir, and utilize this opportunity since she's beseeching input to improve the delivery of services for the CDC. Well, messaging is really the biggest challenge as far as I can see in dealing with the pandemic. So this is an opportunity for a BHT to step up and make a name for itself with the CDC. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gibson. Dr. Cutter had her hand up. I think she wanted to be unmuted again.
Yeah, I thank you very much. I'm not really sure if this is the right time to make this comment, but I've heard some people talk about some recommendations about diet and things like that, weight loss. And I just want to make it clear, when I work with someone on weight management and improving their health through lifestyle modification, there's 7 factors that we develop a plan on, okay? But if you are a primary care physician or a specialist and somebody's coming through your office, people really only have attention for 3 things. So that's why I named those 3 things: the water, the vegetables, and the exercise. But, to really get a comprehensive plan for that individual, you really need to go over those 7 factors. So I just wanted to, bring that up and make sure that everybody knew there is a difference between, what I do with my health and wellness patients and what do I do with my surgical oncology patients who are not participating in health and wellness.
And let me just quickly, Dr. Maxey, add something to what Dr. Cutter is talking about. Someone did put in the chat, and as a former state public health officer, I have to say, there are so many other things that impact our health. The environments where we live with respect to how much air pollution are we breathing if we're living in Pasadena, where the onshore flow brings everything up to there, whether we're living in DC or in Philadelphia, because we have a national audience, and we're living in old buildings that still have lead-based paint. That's still a significant issue in many communities. And food deserts were mentioned. It's great to look for those 4 to 5 servings of vegetables every day. But if all you've got in your neighborhood is a 7-Eleven, it's kind of hard to do that. So I think that as we look at this issue of health and preserving health, most of us are born pretty healthy. So it's kind of preserving health along the lifespan. We really have to take a very comprehensive look at all of the things that impact our health. So I'll stop there. It's Sunday and there's a whole nother sermon that comes after that, but I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. I want to thank Dr. Ernie Smith also for referring Dr. Belay, Dr. Thaddeus Belay to me, and Dr. Smith is with us every week. He won't talk, but he does a lot of work behind the scenes. Dr. Smith, you here with us today?
He is here, but he can't talk because we don't have him unmuted.
He can talk or won't talk. Dr. Smith, say hello to us.
Let's see if we can get him unmuted. There we go. Go ahead, Dr. Smith.
I had myself on mute. Now, if I do all the talking, I'm going to be right. That's why I don't say much. I have to learn. Okay. So I appreciate Dr. Belay coming on today. I talked to him over the week and hooked him up. And we're going to be working with the U.S. African Institute as a Black Community Health Task Force and Education Task Force. As you know, I'm with Charles Drew University of Medicine and Science. I'm on the Clinical and Community Programs Committee of the Academic Senate. And so this is what we do to get the university more involved in community activities. So this is one of the things that I would very much appreciate that he came on today.
Okay, I want to make sure that you and Dr. Belay both make contact with Dr. Cutter.
Okay.
And, there's a lot that she can do with us and for us.
Will do. Will
So
do.
we've had a pretty robust discussion. Oh, one thing, did we talk a minute about colon cancer at all?
No,
Was that on our list, Dr. Neighbor Stevens?
no. I mean, it's a major issue, but it wasn't part of that list.
Okay. All right.
Dr.
All right.
Maxey, if I may.
Yes, who's that?
I did put, this is Gibson. I did put an article in the chat about a very small colon cancer trial that was unbelievable in the sense that it was 100% successful in treating colon cancer patients. There was a 100% remission, and some of these people were colon cancer patients that had stage 3 and etc. But the fact that there's room for further investigation on this medication called a checkpoint inhibitor, that bears further investigation, because this one could perhaps for some patients provide a wherewithal that might be quite hopeful for them in the future.
Okay. I'm reaching out to Dr. Brian Stone. He was with us a few weeks ago, and he has a project to get more. Can I put you on speaker a minute? I'm on the Black Health Trust, and I just want you to remind our people about your clinical research and what patients can do to get registered with you. I've got you on. Do you mind?
Oh, no, I don't mind.
Go ahead right now.
Hi, everyone.
Go ahead,
You all
Dr.
hear me?
I got you on.
Oh, okay. So I've been in medicine for 37 years. I've known Randall for many years through the NMA, and we have been struggling trying to increase African American recruitment and participation in clinical trials. The methodology that continues to be used is going to the same large institutions and expecting them to recruit African Americans. That it's not going to work. There's such a huge trust deficit in the community, and no one has ever taken the time to do a good survey of a large sample of African Americans to understand their attitudes regarding clinical trials. So I've created with some partners a validated questionnaire on a JOT form platform, and we're trying to get 5,000 African American men and women of all age groups to fill out the questionnaire. We're using a faith-based model. So I'm working with the Church of God in Christ and several Baptist ministers in the Birmingham area to try to hit this number. I think it would be important to not just saturate the questionnaire with people from Alabama, but try to get different regions of the country to assess different attitudes, because there may be some differences if you're on the East Coast versus South versus Midwest versus the West.
Can you give us your contact information?
Yes. The questionnaire can be found on the website www.clinical diversity solutions, one word. That's clinicaldiversitysolutions.com. The questionnaire will immediately pop up. If you would like to contact me, my email is B as in boy, Stone, MD 59@gmail.com. And anything you guys can do to help would be appreciated. If you want to talk to me to learn more about what we're doing, we've been working on this for a couple of years. And we have the goal is to eventually go to a faith-based registry of patients that would like to participate in trials and have it controlled through the church, not just turning over names to pharmaceutical companies. So I'll tell you more about it if you want to know. And thanks, Randall.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Stone. Appreciate
All right.
it. All right. So that's very important. We'll make sure we make that information available. So we're close to the time where we want to thank people for spending their time with us. Dr. Cutter, you have any final thoughts you'd like to share with us? And thank you for taking a quick notice to join us on a Sunday afternoon. Is Dr. Cutter unmuted?
I'm unmuted now. So, well, I just, the final thing I want to share is that, we all have a role to play in the health of our community. Health and wellness is a community effort. And so if you have somebody in your life that is, kind of in the midst of some health practices that are not serving them, there's nothing that stops you from saying, let's eat together and preparing a meal, that's healthful, let's take a walk together, any of those things. It's really just like it takes a village to raise a child, sometimes it takes a village to increase the health of a family or an individual. So this doesn't have to come from a doctor per se, and it doesn't have to, come from someone's parent per se or, family member, but it can come from somebody who just cares about somebody in their community. So I did want to bring that up. And the other thing that I'd like to mention is, really so many salient points were brought out, the stigma behind labeling sexual acts and things like that. I think that is an important other topic. But the other topic that came out was molestation and really kind of defining what that is. There's a lot of people who went through college or what have you, had some issues where they participated in some molestation acts, right? They were the perpetrators. They don't even know that that's what they did because they don't really fully understand what that was. And I think kind of delving into that, what that means, because I think that will inform their behavior moving forward, how they deal with their wives, their daughters, sisters, and things like that. And then on the flip side of that, those people who experience that molestation, male and female, kind of destigmatizing that, and then setting them on a path of how do you enter into healthful relationships and taking care of your body, taking care of yourself without anger, without resentment. So I want to thank you for having me on today and also really bringing out these very important topics. And it's always so impressive who's on the panel and who the moderators are. So thank you again.
And thank you so much. And I don't drink alcohol, but the martini is in our future. So thank you so much. Dr. Jordan, always a pleasure. Do you have a final word, sir?
No, so I've enjoyed this program.
Very good. I started to say Dr. Ivan Walks.
You started to say Dr. Ivan Walks?
No, I started to say Dr. Ivanka Walks.
Dr. Maxey, I've been called a lot worse, and the day is not even half over yet. No, I wanted to just let everyone know that these are the kinds of conversations I think we need to have. I think we can sometimes spend a little bit too much time celebrating the problem, and we have a lot of challenges in our community. And so when we get on with folks like Dr. Jordan, like Dr. Cutter, like Dr. Belay, who have a vision for a good way forward for our community and a way for us to work together to realize that vision, I think that's what this time should be about on Sundays. How do we move forward in ways that make sense? So I just want to thank everyone for that.
Thank Dr. Neighbor Stevens, I thank you for coming up with our key topics for the day, and you have any final words?
Thank you, Dr. Maxon. My final word is an ask for everyone in the audience to pay attention to what's happening in this country with polio. Now, as a pediatrician and the pediatric community at large, we started the conversation probably midway, early 21, raising concern about the drastic drop-off in pediatric preventive care visits and the drop-off in the rate of the immunizations being administered in the pediatric population. And sure enough, here we are in 22 talking about polio now being found in the wastewater of not just New York City, but other places as well. And so just keep an eye on that story. If you have children, if you have children of your own, or you have children in your family, or you have children in your neighborhood, and their parents, for whatever reason, have not gotten them immunized, this is not a plaything. Polio was really eradicated in this country, and now it's back. And there's even, we are very educated. What do viruses do? Viruses mutate. So there is concern that not only is polio back, but now that it's back, it may do its thing and create an even bigger problem than we had before. So keep tuned in on that polio issue.
Well, thank you. Also, I noticed we have online with us a gentleman who's presented to us before and has agreed to come back. His name is Dr. Jehudi. I'm going to call him Dr. V. And he spoke to us about the pathological basis of violence. And we're working out a couple of dates for him to come back with parts 2 and 3 of his Sunday talk. And we also want to present him in an in-depth talk on a Wednesday night. I want to take this time to introduce that. I want to go back to our first Wednesday night in a few months on the 31st of August of the medical advisory. And I'd love to have many of our advisors at that point. And very quickly, I just want to recognize a couple of our advisors for a brief 30-second word. Dr. Sherrod, Dr. Steiner, Dr. Johnson, any comments? Short words.
This is Dr. Sherrod. Thank you, Dr. Maxey. I just wanted to make a comment on the polio. I was actually a member of the advisory committee back in 1995 to 98 when we made the recommendation. We changed the recommendation from oral to injectable polio. And at that time, one of the risks of doing that was the loss of gut immunity. And so it was predicted that polio would come back because of the loss of gut community when you de-seed the oral vaccine. And it was a risk-benefit analysis. And the reason it was done was because of those kids who were born already immunocompromised, but you don't know it until later when they are older. So what we're seeing, pardon me?
We need to go back to the oral form of.
Well, I'm not making that recommendation now, but I actually voted against the change because of that. And one of the things that happens in lower income populations and diverse communities is that compliance is not as good with the injectable vaccine as it was with the oral vaccine. So I was actually the only person on the committee who voted against the recommendation. We actually discussed this at the National Medical Association. I don't know if Dr. Stevens remember, we had a special session on that. And I even talked to the American Academy of Pediatrics, but for the risk benefit analysis is that we should save those immunocompromised kids from getting polio, which were a small number of kids, and take the risk of switching to the injectable to save those kids, as opposed to now we're dealing with a resurgence of polio, but that was predicted. It's been over 20 years now.
Dr. Walker, you got a comment on that as a public officer?
Maybe when I'm not busy.
I do not have a comment on that. That's not something that I've looked at, Dr. Maxey.
Okay, Dr. Steiner?
Sure. Good afternoon, Randall and everyone else today. This was another great presentation, and especially wanted to point out what Dr. Jordan was saying to highlight it a bit more about obesity, a subject that all of us are afraid to talk about in some ways. We don't want to offend anyone, but obesity is really the health crisis of America right now, and especially for the Black community. And it leads to, as many of us well know, hypertension, kidney disease, stroke, cancer, and especially diabetes. And the list goes on and on. So I'd love to have a focus group in the future just on obesity and take the lead, just like Bill Maher has been doing lately on a few of his shows. And I think the more we take it out of the shadows and get it up front, I think the more helpful it'll be for people. So thank you all today. Another great day on BHT. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other advisors on Dr. Neighbor Stephen that walks?
Dr. Maxey, I think the idea of a topic or a session on molestation that Dr. Jordan brought up would be a good topic, and I actually have a speaker for you, but I think it should be discussed in depth because it is a major problem, I believe, in the United States.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much.
I
Go
think I would like to just say I completely agree with Dr. Sherrod that's a topic worth talking about. It impacts so many other things. It impacts teenage pregnancy. It impacts so many other things.
Is
Yeah.
Dr. Rhonda Johnson on?
Yes, Dr. Johnson is on,
Can you unmute her?
and she was just unmuted for a moment and then back on mute. There she is.
I think too, sometimes it's easy to put the responsibility for change on people who feel hopeless, who feel that they don't have any wherewithal to make a lot of changes. And so, like Dr. Cutter said, you have to give people tools. You have to give them hope. For that 500-pound woman, where does she start? Of course, she has to address her mental health, but there's such a lack of access to mental health services in our communities. There's over preponderance of corner stores, liquor stores, advertising directed at unhealthy food, alcohol, tobacco in the communities where people live. How do we get that stuff out of our communities? Where we work influences our health. And so many of our people work in factories, work in environments that are highly toxic. So it is not a simple solution. And I think sometimes we overstress. I'm not taking away personal responsibility, but sometimes people don't feel empowered. So I think it's so important to try to remember that in a compassionate way, that we have to give people tools that they really have the power to use and overcome adversity in their lives.
Well
Thank
said.
you so much, Dr. Rhonda Johnson. Well, I thank everybody for spending a part of their Sunday afternoon with the Black Health Trust. We'll be back next Sunday and every Sunday, and we're gonna restart our advisory meetings on the 31st, Wednesday. and we'll notify you of the topics, and thank you everybody for attending. Have a good day.
Dr. Maxey, before
Yes,
everyone
sir.
goes, I just put in the chat because I'm trifling and wait till the last minute. But I just put in the chat some information about a project that I'm doing with the National Coalition of 100 Black Women and the Black Coalition Against COVID. We're doing as part of the National Coalition of 100 Black Women public education series. We're doing a program called Mental Health Concerns Due to COVID-19, Let's Talk. And it's tomorrow, Monday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, in partnership with the Black Coalition Against COVID. That's in the chat for anyone to look at it. Now, if I was not trifling, I would have the information in there about the web address and the Zoom link or whatever it is, but I don't have that. But I think if you go to the National Coalition website, it should be there because it's part of an ongoing series that they do. So again, I apologize for giving you less of the information than you need, but maybe it's enough to make somebody go look for it. And it should be a very good program. It's just an hour tomorrow night.
All right. Thank you so much. And thanks again, Dr. Nabors-Stevens, Dr. Walks, and Dr. Jordan, and Dr. Cutter, and all those who participated. Have a great day.
Good day, everyone.
Thank you, Simon Cooper.
Thank you, Simon.